And hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of Narrative Live. We are covering Trump under arrest tonight. You can absolutely mark June 13th, 2023 in the history books. It's the first time a former U.S. president has been under arrest, booked in a Miami courthouse today on a 38-count indictment that alleges the unthinkable, really, when you think about it, a United States president committing espionage and then lying repeatedly to cover it up. Now, the news reports that you've been seeing all day and all the week, in fact, or last week at least, have been calling this the documents case, have been calling it the docs case, have been saying it's everything but the espionage case. But tonight we're going to show you why it really matters that we call it an espionage case, because that is what it is. And we'll explain that to you throughout tonight's show. This is the first time, of course, a U.S. president has ever been arrested in a federal case. Trump pleaded not guilty, as expected. He sat visibly agitated, flanked by his attorneys. His body man, who's also accused in this particular conspiracy, Walt Nauta, was also in the courtroom today. Judge Jonathan Goodman presiding imposed communication restrictions between Trump, Nauta, and the other potential witnesses. No cameras were allowed in the courthouse today, of course, which meant we could only find out about what happened from the reporters that were inside. One of those reporters was MSNBC's Garrett Haig, and here's his report from outside the courthouse.
In fact, Mr. Trump sat with his arms kind of tightly crossed in front of his chest, only really leaning over to speak to his attorneys from time to time. He did not personally speak a word in public in the courtroom. It was his, I guess now lead counsel in this case, Todd Blanche, who entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. Beyond that, the bulk of what was nearly an hour-long hearing today was spent discussing the conditions of Mr. Trump's bond and release, which was basically what would be referred to as a personal recognizance bond. No cash, no restrictions on travel, either international or domestically. The only restriction placed on him, not actually something requested by prosecutors, but rather requested by the judge, a no contact about the case specifically, or at all would be impossible given the nature of the job that Nauta performs for Donald Trump. And then again, a lengthy discussion about how a no contact order or a no contact about the case order might be put in place with Mr. Trump and all the other people thought to be either witnesses or victims in this case. Mr. Trump's attorneys went back and forth with the judge about the relative feasibility of that. Where they landed was that the government's going to produce a list of witnesses with whom they'd like to make sure that Mr. Trump has no contact just about the case. And then present that to Mr. Trump's attorneys. They'll sort that out. And then there'd be no contact between Mr. Trump and those particular witnesses, but only about the case. There was widespread agreement that it would not be possible to have a blanket no contact order, given that most of the people thought to be witnesses in this case either worked for Mr. Trump or worked for the Secret Service protecting Mr. Trump. In fact, one of the witnesses is an attorney still employed by Donald Trump. So that took up the bulk of this hearing. To get ahead of questions I know are coming, no next hearing scheduled, no future date for when Mr. Trump has to appear in court again. Remember, this was a magistrate judge kind of handling the blocking and tackling, the basics of an arraignment, a bond hearing, a first appearance. It'll be, as best we know now still, Judge Aileen Cannon, who's going to take up the bulk of the trial at a date to be set later.
That's MSNBC's Garrett Haig reporting outside the Miami courtroom today, or Miami courthouse today. Now, as this case unfolds, the nation and the world will be watching closely, of course. Some analysts are saying that they're concerned about the potential of violence breaking outside not only the courthouse today, but also across the country, a January the 6th kind of uprising, perhaps, in response to people who are supporters of Donald Trump. Now, that didn't happen today. There were some protesters outside the courthouse. In fact, Luke Broadwater of the New York Times spoke to MSNBC about this. They were indefinitely present. They might have even been present in their thousands, but nowhere near the number of the people they were fearing would show up, and certainly no violence today outside the courthouse.
The Miami police force said they were ready for up to 50,000 people. They didn't get anywhere close to that. Maybe a few thousand were here. There were a few close skirmishes. I saw some people get nose to nose and a couple times when tempers flared. But for the most part, we didn't see anything that was anywhere close to anything like January 6th. The Trump supporters I spoke with, for the most part, had not read the indictment. They said they weren't going to trust anything that came out of the Justice Department. They believed Trump was a victim of a deep state attack on him. And they had seen the picture of the boxes in the bathroom. So that had broken through. Maybe not the words of the indictment, but they were aware of that photograph. But they wrote that off saying, well, yes, that wasn't great, but Joe Biden also had classified documents, or Mike Pence had classified documents. They used an argument that other people also perhaps were irresponsible with with classified documents. When I would then bring up, well, but those people, after learning about it, would then quickly reported it and cooperated with the government. And what's alleged here is that Donald Trump didn't cooperate for many, many months, and in fact worked to obstruct the government. At least that's what is alleged in the indictment. They would say that they didn't believe that Donald Trump would have given them back, and they didn't believe the indictment if that's what indeed it said. They would come up with any argument to defend Donald Trump no matter what. A couple people explained it to me like this, that to them this is a team sport, and they're going to root for their guy no matter what. One guy likened it to like a college football game, and that the federal government is on the other side. That's the other team. Jack Smith, the Justice Department, they're the opponents, and Trump and his supporters are all together. And so they're going to root for their team no matter what. They're going to cheer for their guy no matter what. And they're not going to listen to what the facts are and try to distinguish truth from fiction. They're just going to root for their side.
I do find that so interesting, talking about this in terms of sports teams or two sports teams and in college perhaps fighting against each other, and you just support your team no matter what. Of course, the situation here is very different because the team on the one side isn't actually on your team. And that's why tonight's show is all about understanding what this case is really about. This case is about espionage. This case is about classified material being taken out of the United States government and potentially being sold or being shopped around to various governments around the world for either money or as protection or who knows what. And that's what we're going to find out later on in this case. So for everyone who's just saying this is just about documents, this is not just about documents. And it's certainly, of course, as everyone has been pointing out, no comparison at all to what's been going on in the Biden investigation or the Pence investigation. And perhaps as a way to prove all this to you, because I know there's many people who are skeptical about this notion of espionage and a former U.S. president. How can it be that a former U.S. president is conducting espionage when he, in fact, was the president? I mean, he is the rule. So how could he possibly be, betraying himself? Well, of course, as we know, Donald Trump has got a bit of a history of all of this. And that's why none of this is surprising to people who, like me, have been, at this for a very long time, trying to understand exactly how we were able to get basically a Manchurian candidate, which is what we have now in the White House, in the White House at least for the last few years. I'm sorry I'm moving the camera around on you a little bit because I just need to set up the next shot, which I'm doing all by myself because I got to do it. So pardon me for that. Let me just go into it right here. So what I thought might be interesting for all of you guys at home tonight and for me was to go back a little bit in time and to review Trump's full-on espionage history. Not just because I'm trying to build a circumstantial case or anything like that against Mr. Trump. Of course, Mr. Trump is going to be found out whether he's guilty or not based on the indictment and what is presented in court. None of this stuff that I'm about to tell you is applicable to the court case. None of it will be revealed in the court case. However, contextually, it's so important to remember the stuff that Donald Trump is basically a Russian asset, not even basically is a Russian asset, and maybe even an asset for other countries around the world. So let's begin by taking you back. These are all narrative articles you see on the right there. The first articles that we posted on the website in December 2016 was all about the Russia House is what we called it. And it was about how this new administration seemed to be controlled by lots of people with big connections to the Kremlin. Now, that's being prosecuted in many, many different ways. And through the Mueller report was ultimately not prosecuted perhaps to everyone's satisfaction. But nevertheless, there were enough indictments and convictions there to prove to everybody that, in fact, there was an element of conspiracy between the Russians and members of Donald Trump's campaign. But more specifically, as we started digging deeper into this whole thing, there's maybe 9 or so key points that people need to remember about Donald Trump. Firstly, in June of 2016, we're talking about the summer of 2016, all the way leading up to the election in November 2016, Donald Trump was ably assisted by Russian operatives of many kind, offering help, some of which he may not have asked for, some of it he did ask for. You'll remember he says, "I love WikiLeaks," or "WikiLeaks, if you could find those emails, let us know." Some of it was just help that he might have gotten maybe unasked for. When the GRU, the Russian intelligence agency, hacked the DNC servers and then leaked those servers in contents. Well, that all seemed to be a coordinated effort between Roger Stone and the GRU, remember, through Guccifer. So you've got an element there right at the very beginning that Russia was involved in electing this man president. And I think that to most people, that is actually factually true still, although some people like to call it a hoax, the former president included. You remember in January of 2017, Michael Flynn, the president's new national security advisor, who had been under some suspicion before of being associated with Vladimir Putin in various ways. Now, there he was in January of 2017, identified as a potentially compromised national security advisor, someone who had taken secret documents from the White House SCIF. I mean, that takes it a whole other level, but, it had removed documents that were classified from the SCIF, and we don't know what happened to them. We also know, of course, that he resigned soon after that, fired really by Donald Trump for this very reason, that he was compromised, that he couldn't do this job because of his associations with the Russians. In fact, his connection specifically with the former ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. By the time May came around, you might remember that Kislyak brought his boss, the foreign minister, Lavrov, over to a nice unannounced meeting at the White House. In fact, no one knew about this particular meeting, not even the American press. We had to rely on TASS, the Russian agency, to provide us all the information there. So in that meeting, apparently, Donald Trump, who is now under, indicted as a potential espionage crimes, did another act of espionage, although he was in the White House. At that point, he could declassify things at that point. And so he told his two guests from Russia about an ISIS plot to blow up commercial planes. He revealed that to Lavrov and Sergei Kislyak. How nice of him to do, especially when ISIS is considered to be founded by Russia itself. So just in those first few months, you can see from the election campaign all the way through his first 6 months in the administration, there are enough fact points and events to point out to everybody that Trump has always operated as a Russian asset inside the White House. And so when we now see that these missing documents have been stored in his home with people being able to access it, you need to look at it from that perspective. If he's still a Russian asset, if he's still working for the Russians, or he's still working for that kind of intelligence agency, if it's not the Russians, maybe the Israelis, maybe the Chinese, who knows? Maybe he's a free agent for all of them. Then perhaps all those documents were in fact exposed, or may have been exposed to foreign entities. September 2017, just to keep you, keep this list going here. We remember the CIA director at the time, Mike Pompeo, who had undertaken his own visit to visit Vladimir Putin on a separate mission to Putin's very nice dacha in the Black Sea. Well, you'll recall there that the CIA director also brought in two of the intelligence chiefs from the FSB to come and visit him at the CIA headquarters. Never done that before. And then he also was under watch, according to many onlookers. We broke the story on Narativ for handing over classified documents to the White House so they could potentially reveal it to their friends in Russia or wherever they might want to reveal them to. So you've got September 2017, then Mike Pompeo again, credibly being watched because of his ties to Russia. June 2018, Donald Trump meets Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, in what was the first U.S.-Russia summit in Helsinki. And boy, do you remember that? It's hard to forget that moment when Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, in a massively televised press conference, embarrassed the United States completely by really exposing their unusual relationship. And I was going to play you a clip from that, only I don't see it here. However, if you give me 1 minute, just to make sure I really don't have it. Oh, there it is. Let's take a look at what happened during that press conference, that whole incredible day in Helsinki. Here's the presser.
People came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer.
Tonight, the president's own intelligence chief, Dan Coates, shot back with a rare rebuke. We have been clear in our assessment of Russian meddling in the 2016 election, and we will continue to provide unvarnished and objective intelligence in support of our national security. But this morning, President Trump booming tensions on the U.S. and the Mueller investigation. Tweeting, "Our relationship with Russia has never been worse thanks to many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity. And now, the rigged witch hunt." Today asked, does he think Putin bears any responsibility?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it. People are being brought out to the fore. So far that I know, virtually none of it related to the campaign. And they're going to have to try really hard to find somebody that did relate to the campaign. That was a clean campaign. I beat Hillary Clinton easily. And frankly, we beat her.
Putin revealed for the first time who he wanted to win.
President Putin, did you want President Trump to win the election?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because he talked about bringing the Russian relationship back to normal.
Does the Russian government have any compromising material on President Trump or his family?
I did hear this rumor, he said. It is hard to imagine nonsense on a bigger scale than this.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago.
So that report, of course, from NBC that night of the Helsinki summit where Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin, to everyone's astonishment, of course, uttering those words about Putin being so incredibly strong. And of course, the biggest news there was him basically doubting the intelligence community of the United States assessment about Russia's involvement. So you've got someone, who would rather side with Russia and its president, believing its intelligence over the intelligence assessment of his own country, of his own community. So indeed, you've got someone who's very, very compromised. There's no doubt about that. I'm just, by the way, joining you guys on chat, and I'm sorry if it's taking me so long. I know it's only some of you can talk to me on chat. If anything is wrong with the feed, please let me know. I'm on my own tonight, so I can't follow all these things. So if you're hearing everything correctly, it'll be great. And if everything's working out, let me know. I'll also take your questions if you want on chat, on YouTube. If you go to our YouTube channel at Narativ TV, you'll be able to ask me or comment about anything you want as we go through this next hour, because we are going to go through the entire indictment, or as much of it as we can get through by 9 o'clock. And you'll find some really fascinating stuff that I've been able to highlight. So stick around for that. But let's continue here a little bit, because, it's not only Helsinki, and it's not only Pompeo, and it's not only Flynn, and it's not only Roger Stone and the GRU. It's also Oleg Deripaska. And in February 2019, Narativ posted our expose on Oleg Deripaska, and we linked him to both the WikiLeaks and Roger Stone and the 2016 election interference. And it was a pretty good argument that we placed about Oleg Deripaska being the sort of the chief kingpin, if you like, the kingpin in terms of who Putin was trusting in terms of setting up all the election interference and the attack on democracy, which began in 2016. So again, you've got a pretty compelling case there, 3 incidents, 3 events, all of which pointed to Donald Trump being very, very engaged with the Russians throughout his entire presidency. Then in August 2020, the Senate Intelligence Committee, this is probably the most definitive piece of evidence out there. In Volume 5, the Senate Intelligence Committee describes literally hundreds of actions by Trump, his associates, and in 2016, ultimately how they interfered in the Russian election, in the American elections, how Russia interfered in that, getting him elected. It's really an indisputable and very valid document, the Senate Intelligence Committee's Volume 5. If you haven't read it, everyone should. It's 900 and something pages of gripping information, but it's all credible. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt after you read that you know that Donald Trump was elected because of Russian help. In January 2021, Donald Trump attempted a coup. As you all know, on January the 6th, we reported on Narrative about a Russian operative named Charles Bausman, who is a suspected Russian spy who helped develop all of that, who helped build the white nationalist movement in the United States, and who also was seen on that day, on January the 6th, in video running around the halls there of Capitol Hill, where shooting video, streaming live the events of January the 6th, and an attempted coup organized by the Russians, and guess who's there to shoot it for them live? One of the coordinators they had out here, in the building, caught on tape, Charles Bausman. So yet again, more evidence of what I believe is kind of irrefutable proof that Donald Trump's entire presidency, all the way to the end, all the way to the coup attempt and beyond, has been about Russia, has been about the espionage, has been about the coalition that Russia, that's built around Russia as well. Of course, we've mentioned China, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE. All those countries are also believed to have participated in some way or another in the attack on democracy. But really, the core narrative here is all about Russia. And perhaps the most convincing stuff that we had on was in January 2021, when we had a former KGB Washington spy chief who worked out of the Washington, D.C. Residentura is how you say it, which basically means the headquarters of a group of Russian spies or a collection of Russian spies in the United States. This guy was the head of a particular Residentura in Washington, D.C., and he told Craig Unger in his book, and also us on Narrative TV, that Donald Trump was an asset for the Russians all the way back to the 1980s, all the way back to 1983. In fact, he had evidence to show us that one of these owners of an electronics store in the Flatiron had first spotted Donald Trump, and that a few years later, the efforts to recruit Donald Trump was stepped up into the next phase. And here he is describing what that next phase is and who specifically from the Russian side was involved. This is Yuri Shvet, a former head of the KGB Residentura in Washington, D.C., describing what was going on in the New York office regarding Donald Trump.
Guys, they opened this electronic store, and the KGB had to be sure that they're reliable, that they're not double agent. For this, they had to deliver information. And information they could have at this time was the spotted information. And this is how they reported to the KGB in New York State about Donald Trump. Later, it was analyzed and came to the conclusion that it's time to put him in contact with the local field officer, that it's time to establish a direct contact with Donald Trump from somebody from Russian New York Residentura. This time to speed up and deepen cultivation.
And so who made that first contact in 1983?
One person we know was the daughter of then ambassador, the head of the Soviet mission at the United Nations. And several months later, he became the Soviet ambassador to Washington, D.C. I strongly believe that she was a Russian intelligence officer. The KGB used her to bring Donald Trump on this summer 87 trip. I believe it was a different officer who was meeting Donald Trump under the modus operandi about once a month.
Do we know who that is?
It was Yuri Antipov, acting station, but I'm not sure. Or Natalia Dubinina was in her first marriage, and her, as far as I understand, her husband was Alexander Yakovenko.
And Alexander Yakovenko, for those uninitiated, is the former ambassador from the Soviet Union and Russia to the UK, and the man largely credited with Brexit and a lot of other advances made by the Russians in British society and in the United Kingdom in terms of developing a big Russian presence in the UK, which is still a big issue today. I thank you all very much for the messages. I know there's some audio challenges. There's some audio static, but every YouTube live feed has had. Yeah, I don't know what this static is coming from. I hear it clearly in my head, and yet every time I do a live show, somehow it becomes a bit garbled, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. I'm not going to try to figure it out on the air because I may screw something up, but hopefully you can still listen to the show, and then when the podcast is up, you can fix any issues that have shown up. Other people are saying here that what is going on here? That the Chinese were also filming on January the 6th. That's indeed true. The Chinese were filming on January the 6th. And the Chinese were also very involved in everything that was happening on January the 6th. And throughout this entire exercise, this operation by Russia to install a president in the United States that is, adherent to their needs and their demands. I mean, China, of course, benefits from all of that. But, when I went back and looked at all of this, because I've been talking so much about the enemies of democracy and how this is about a coalition of countries involving Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the Egyptians, the Israelis, and others, and of course, Russia and China among those. It just blew my mind away going back and looking through all this narrative content that we had at how much Russia there really is, and how much it still boggles my mind that so many Americans still think of it as a hoax, that there are still so many people who buy Donald Trump and who buy Fox News and buy Elon Musk's BS, that it was a hoax. And that is why I continue to worry about what's going to happen into in the next election. We are facing an incredible propaganda effort by these countries to really fight the truth. So it doesn't matter what happens in the courtroom so much, although it will, of course, matter what happens in the courtroom. But what will matter is who wins this public opinion war, who gets to control the narrative. And it's right now, as much as people like to believe on the left that Joe Biden has the upper hand in that narrative war, it's just not true. I mean, you look at the number of people on the Republican base that still think Donald Trump is being hunted down and there's a witch hunt going on. This just is not the case. The thing that's happening is that there is a propaganda effort, unlike anything we've ever seen before, manipulating data, manipulating social media, manipulating our influences, manipulating our television networks. And it's basically still providing us with an environment where truth is not believed, or at least not believed by everybody. So heading into this next phase with this trial is going to be really interesting, because that the spin masters are already going to be out there from day one, which is why I'm doing the show we're doing tonight, because it's really, really, really important that people focus on the espionage piece of this. Yes, I know it's not being billed as that by all the networks. I know that MSNBC was out there calling it the docs case today, and they're the ones who supposedly on the left, excuse me. But the truth of it is, my allergies are just horrific today. I don't know what yours are like, but they are out of control. So hence the red eyes and the, and the runny nose. But let me, it's not the docs case. It's the espionage case. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why it's the espionage case by going through the indictment with you this evening in the next 28 minutes that we have or so. So stick around. I hope you'll stick around with me for that. It should be a really fascinating conversation as we go through that. I should also tell you about, if you're a creator, you pour your heart and soul into your podcast, but post-production tasks can be a real pain. As you know, as I know, boy, I do not like post-production, but you can spend hours generating show notes, transcripts, and social media clips, and that's on top of editing and producing your own show. It's really quite a lot of work. That's where Podium comes in. Podium is an AI tool designed specifically for creators and podcasters. Now, with Podium, you can generate show notes, chapters, summaries, clips for social media, a full transcript, suggested episode titles, social media posts, and more. And it's all done in minutes, not hours. So, Podium improves your podcast's SEO and overall accessibility. And with Podium GPT, you can even generate articles and marketing copy copy in seconds. So why not try Podium today? There's a really good incentive for you. You'll get 3 hours for free and 50% off your first month. Say goodbye to post-production headaches and hello to more time to create. So check out Podium. There's no reason why you shouldn't. They have a very special deal for you just for people who are parts of Narativ. And it's very hard for you to read, but you can see it says hello Podium pages, ? So it's hello.podium.page, ? via, this way, via Zev, via equals Zev. Hello.podium.page, ? via equals Zev. It's a lot to do on a live show. And then can you imagine the editing afterwards? So I really do. If you run a podcast or you just like something that summarizes a lot of audio for you, maybe you just want to summarize other people's podcasts, this is a great product. The guys at Podium are terrific. You upload your podcast and they spit out a very, very accurate, factual description of the podcast that you put in there. And I rely on it. So I really, if you've been noticing an improvement in our show notes, it's because of Podium. So if you're a podcaster, that's one of my big secrets is Podium. Check them out, and don't forget to use the code. I'll list it in the description below as well. All right, let's get back into this. Let's talk about the indictment. I'm going to go through every single page I can as quickly as I can. I know a lot of you have read it. A lot of you are going to say, do we have to do this again? No, you don't have to. You can go home. You can switch off. You don't have to go through it. But if you do stick around, I promise I'll give you one or two like absolute nuggets out of this show, or stuff that I found as I was doing the research in this that you might find interesting and that you may find valuable as you go and discuss it elsewhere. Sometimes I'm going to put this up on full screen because I just got to blow my nose, and I think I'm going to do that right now. And then I'll be right back in just a second, and we'll go through the whole indictment. All right, we're back now, and I apologize for that. I'm hoping these are the right pages because I seem to be starting on page 9 when I really want to be starting on page 1. So let's go back to page 1 over here. It's not letting me. There you go. So obviously this is the case against Donald Trump and Waltine Noda. Walt is his name, the body man, as it were. That's the description they have for Walt. And the indictment reads as you'd expect in those first few pages. It's certainly really critical of, very factual, I should say, lays out the indictment as it alleges that Trump was involved in all these activities. And then on the next page, this is when it gets kind of more interesting. You'll see. Sorry about this. I haven't done this in a while. So here we got. At the very top of the page, you can notice this at number 2. It says, over the course of his presidency, Trump gathered newspapers, press clippings, letters, notes, cards, photographs, official documents, and other materials in a cardboard box that he kept in the White House. Among the material Trump stored in his boxes were hundreds of classified documents. Now, that may just be that he's collecting mementos in a box and he's just keeping mementos. Or, if you're a little bit more suspicious of this president, you might say that there has been an ongoing maybe even premeditated attempt to steal the stuff, to basically, to make sure that all these classified documents were going to leave the White House with him so his bosses in the Kremlin could take a look at them afterwards. That's certainly the way I read some of that. Number 3, the classified documents Trump stored in his boxes include information regarding defense and weapons capabilities of both the United States and foreign countries, United States nuclear programs and potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its military attack, and plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. These are not confidential classified documents about the budget. They're not classified confidential documents about the healthcare plan. These are not, classified documents about maybe development deals we have with countries that we're our allies. These are all documents related to war. These are documents related to the weapons capabilities of the United States and the weapons capabilities of our foreign adversaries, mostly, but other foreign countries as well, plus our nuclear program, plus all the vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies. So you know, you can say these are just documents, classified documents that don't mean a thing, but these are classified documents of very specific nature, designed to educate our enemies about our capabilities and about what we know about them. Only if we were going to war with them. Only you wouldn't really need all the weapons capabilities or all this other stuff unless you were contemplating an actual war with the United States, in which case it would be very useful if the former president walks out of the White House with full plans on that. So keep that in mind as you go through all of this. Number 5, the Mar-a-Lago Club was an active social club which between January 2021 and August 22 hosted events for tens of thousands of members and guests after Trump's presidency. And the Mar-a-Lago Club was not authorized. We know that, of course. And then goes through this incredible, long list of places that Donald Trump moved all these documents to, from the ballroom, a bathroom with a shower, and an office space, his bedroom, and a storage room. All might seem like, well, why do we care about this? Who cares, Zev? So he moved the stuff around. But why is he moving the stuff around? Note that they include in the same paragraph where they say there are tens of thousands of people there. They also say, hey, he was moving a lot of stuff around. Was he moving all the stuff around so people could gain access to those boxes is the question I have in reading that. And later on, we find out where the documents were finally their resting spot, if you will. That was very accessible to anyone at Mar-a-Lago. And as we've reported to before here on Narativ, Mar-a-Lago is a hotbed of foreign intelligence operations, Chinese and otherwise, but it seems like a lot of Chinese are there. Mr. Guo Wengi, you remember him? Friend of Steve Bannon. He is a member of that club. Plus, there's all these other foreign, operas that we've discussed before. Cindy Yang, I think, was one of them. All present there on a very, very irregular basis. So you have to imagine that not only is the Russian community very prominent in that part of the world, but you've also got the Chinese operatives now inside the Mar-a-Lago, and these documents basically accessible from the pool area is where he finally had it. And what's fascinating in this rest of this indictment is you've got someone who's basically committed a crime. They've got the body or the evidence, whatever it is, but they got to hide it somewhere, and they start moving it around to its best location. And now we're following, this body as it's being moved around. Partly you'd suspect it's to hide it from everybody else that he has it, but partly it looks to me like he's moving it around into more accessible places at each particular stop. So, that's why reading this indictment is highly relevant for everybody. And everyone really should, if you can, take time out to just go through this thing, because it is full of really interesting things. So let's get into page 3 here. So the grand jury issued a subpoena requiring Trump to turn over all the documents with the classification markings, and they were going to do that on March 30th, 2022. And then it goes on to explain that his attorney falsely represented the FBI and grand jury, that Trump did not have the documents called for by the grand jury, that he directed the co-defendant, Waltin Nauda, to move boxes of documents to conceal them from Trump's attorney, that he suggested that his attorney hide or destroy documents called for by the grand jury, and that he providing the FBI and grand jury just some of the documents called for in the grand jury subpoena, so causing a certification to be submitted to the FBI and grand jury that falsely represented all the documents were called for by the grand jury subpoena had been produced. So Trump not only kept these documents, he then created this huge lie, right? As you guys know by now, he instructed his lawyer to instruct another lawyer to sign this certification. He instructed his co-defendant there to move boxes. He was hiding boxes, hiding the truth from his own attorney. Now, why do that? I mean, if you've got a box of documents that belongs to somebody else, why not just send them back? You can go get them again. I mean, you're the former president. I'm sure you can get the discretion to go and get them again. The only reason you do something like that is if you had actually use for them. Now, maybe he was just editing all the boxes, but again, why not just negotiate that with the good people of the FBI, and they'll probably help you. They'll help you do whatever you need to do. Instead, what we've got here is the president obscuring, hiding, moving these boxes around. It looks like he's keeping them for a reason. What's he keeping them for? And the more we drill down into what it is that he kept, the more evidence we get about what he was trying to do, or seemed likely to be trying to do. Pardon me. All right, so where are we now? We are on page 3, and we've got lots more to go. So let's speed this up if we can. Page 4 here. So this again, this talks about the Mar-a-Lago Club again. That they on January the 17th, nearly 1 year after Trump left office, after months of demands by the National Archives and Records Administration for Trump to provide all the missing presidential records, Trump provided only 15 boxes, which contained 197 documents with classification markings, leaving a good number out. On June 3rd, in response to grand jury subpoena, they provided another 38 documents. And then on August 8th, pursuant to the court-authorized search warrant, the FBI received from Trump's office and a storage room at the Mar-a-Lago another 102 documents. And those 102 are particularly interesting to all of us, of course. Then it talks about the layout of the Mar-a-Lago Club and how many people can stay there. 25 guest rooms, a spa, exercise facilities, office space, an outdoor pool and patio. Hundreds of members and staff milling around there all the time. Thousands of guests between January the 20th, 2021 and August 2022. You can just tell how this place was an ideal spot. If you wanted to, accidentally bump into something that was left behind for you, no one would be much the wiser for it if you were an agent of a foreign state. It goes on to explain all the classification markings and the non-form. This is stuff you can read on your own time, and I won't bog you down with it. But, the point behind this is that he really had every opportunity to get special dispensation to say, hey, I will look at these later on. So if I'm just doing this for my record keeping, or I want to adjust my biography or autobiography that I'm writing, or doing it for whatever for his library, he had all the opportunity to say, hey, can I get them back and get these later? We'll mark these off, and then I'll be able to edit this myself. We'll create a skiff here. Everything will be great, right? He didn't do that. He didn't do that, any of that. He hid the stuff. He hid the fact that he had it. He was committing a massive crime. The crime is espionage. That's why he's charged with 31 counts of espionage. There's a reason that's the charge that he's being charged with. And I caution people not to just escape this reality, because it's going to be very easy for the right wing to keep saying, well, it's just documents, whatever. There's no evidence. There's nothing here. Of course, there is proof of intelligence. Now, the problem is, because it's spycraft, it can't show up here. It can't show up in the courtrooms because it's meant to be secret. But you have to believe that there is intelligence information about what these documents were being used for. It boggles the mind that he wouldn't have accepted that or wouldn't have tried to get that, because in the end of the day, that would have been the right way to do it. So the only other rational explanation for not doing it is the fact that you're just basically trying to steal these documents to use for nefarious purposes. And I mentioned the waiver. The waiver was available to him, and I'm just going to try to speed ahead here because I don't want to. Here's the waiver on number 18, Executive Order 13526 provided that a former president could obtain a waiver of the need-to-know requirement if the agency head or senior agency official of the agency that originated the classified information determined in writing that access was consistent with the interests of national security, and 2, took appropriate steps to protect the classified information from unauthorized disclosure or compromise, and ensured that the information was safeguarded in the manner consistent with the order. Trump did not obtain any such waiver for his presidency. So it doesn't look good for Donald Trump in just these initial pages, but where it really starts looking really, really horrific is here on page 8, and it's going to, maybe it's page 9, where he starts moving the stuff around. Now we're on this page. I'm sorry, you're a few pages behind me. I don't think I've switched this around for you. There you go, page 9. I apologize. I should have been showing you all these pages all along. Talk about an editing nightmare that I just created for myself. Well, there you go. At the bottom of this page, it says here, as President of the United States on July 26, 2018, Trump issued the following statement about classified information. You'll recall this. He said, as the head of the executive branch and commander-in-chief, I have a unique constitutional responsibility to protect the nation's classified information, including controlling access to it More broadly, the issue of someone else's security clearance raises larger questions about the practice of former officials maintaining access to our nation's most sensitive secrets long after their time in government has ended. Now, I believe this was about Clapper, the former CIA director, who was, bringing out information from his time with the CIA, and Mr. Trump was offended that it was critical of him, and therefore he was shutting down Mr. Clapper's access to all this confidential information. So it's not like he wasn't aware of what was going on. He knew exactly what the rules were and how he was about to break them, and break them he did. So in the stuff arrives. I guess the boxes arrive, and they're first stored in this. I guess you would call this the white and gold ballroom, or at least that's what they called it, the white and gold ballroom. And it's out there. Oh, sorry about this. 1 second here. I just got to do some things. Talk amongst yourself for a second while I just try to figure something out, will you? Here we go. Let's do this. So on this particular slide, you see the photograph, and I find these photographs so revealing because they're, this isn't a ballroom. I mean, when they have events, maybe they weren't having events that day, but, for a large amount of time, it looks like January 21 to March 15th, 2021, it's saying almost 2 months, these, classified documents belonging to the United States people found their way, and this is where they lived. And so, I don't know if you guys can still hear me. Let me make sure that this audio is coming through to you. And so from that date, there they were, January 21st to March the 15th, sitting in really just, can you imagine the secrets of your country being put out in boxes like this? It looks like a Staples. Staples actually looks more secure than that. And what's that at the back there? That big circular thing. It makes me wonder what that is. It looks like it's some sort of bingo stage prop that they've also got from their events there. This tacky looking place that Mar-a-Lago is. But anyhow, March 15th to April 5th, they need the white and gold ballroom, so they decide to move the same boxes now to the business center. And the business center is not ideal because by April 5th, they are asked to move again. And so it's just remarkable how many times these classified documents, which are so important, so secure, that it's so important to keep them secure that people in this country know where they are all the time. They're being moved around from place to place, and it's crazy. Finally, they go on April 5th, 2021, to the bathroom and showers at the Mar-a-Lago Lake Room. And I'll show you the lake room in just a second from the outside. And so now we've got in these documents some examples of what this, where they were kept in the lake room. Not very well kept at all. And then ultimately they found their way to this other area, which I'll show you in a second, to the storage room. So these are all different photos, and I'll just try to keep up with the changes I've shown you here. Here is... So this is the boxes moved to the storage room now. This is where they were kept in that storage room. Now, as we'll show you in just a few minutes, that storage room is very accessible to everybody. It may look like it's a sealed off room, but it's actually very accessible to everybody from the pool. Anyone who can go to Mar-a-Lago can basically get to that storage room. And here is another area of that storage room. So why do I say that? Why do I say that it's so easy to access this particular storage area? Well, here is the New York Times very, very, very amazing 3D visualization of Mar-a-Lago, which takes us on a nice little trip inside. So let's take a look, shall we? This is Mar-a-Lago. You come in over the top here. You'll see that we'll land up now looking at the pool area from the back part of the property, facing the ocean. You can see that the Trump family has their suite there. That's highlighted now in that brown color. That's where Donald Trump and his family live when they need to. Now they're lifting up the main part of Mar-a-Lago to show us where the storage room is in the basement. And there in the basement, or at least in the first floor, but it certainly looks like it's underneath the main building, is the storage area in question where they kept all these documents. Now, not only is this not healthy for the American secrets to be stored there, such huge American secrets, but both of these doors, these arched doors on the sides of the pool, each of them leads to that storage area. So it's very easy, incredibly easy for someone who might be there at an event to just pop into one of these doors, pop through this little passageway, and then find their way all the way to these documents stored in the storage area of Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump ordered them moved. And, if that to me is a fairly frightening set of events, because as the New York Times points out, not secured by any lock at all. And then you'll see in just a second now, hopefully you'll see that there were a lot of events that took place just outside. And then with access to this passageway, this circular passageway, anyone could have walked in to gain any documents, make copies of any documents, you name it. In fact, you'll remember there was a Chinese spy who was found doing just that, who was, ultimately found with a lot of zip drives and camera and a bunch of other things. And you can see at these events, these photographs taken at these events, they will show these people with the art doors behind them. Some events involved in the white and gold ballroom we just showed you the inside of. Well, there's the awning outside the white and gold ballroom, just meters away from that arch. So while Donald Trump was holding court, absolutely anything could have happened inside, and no doubt. I have no doubt, at least, will be proven in court. Some of these documents may have been accessed. It certainly looks to me like that's likely what happened. Let's see if we can just quickly finish up here the chain of possession, and then I'll show you what I'm really building up to. There's this incredible picture here of what happened when one of these documents or one of these boxes fell over. This is how they were kept. This is the nation's secrets. There's some classified markings on some of these that have been, they've been disappeared, but it certainly tells you how horrific these events were. So the rest of the indictment goes through the lies, the cover-ups. I have no time to go through that with you today. So read it. You'll get a gripping account of how Donald Trump lied about everything. He just wanted to make sure that no one knew he had these documents with him. And it's just clear as you read this thing that this is really an espionage case. This is a foreign asset stealing our documents for whatever purposes he was then going to use them for. This is not the former president of the United States who's a true American patriot accidentally walking away with documents. This is anything but that. And then you look here at page 18, where it says at the bottom of the page, nothing about boxes. He has one he's working on Pine Hall. He knocked out 2 boxes yesterday. So what he means here is that he was going through these boxes. This is his Walt Nader. We're talking to another assistant there. They were going through the boxes and basically figuring out what material he wanted to keep and what he didn't want to keep. So when he knocks out a couple of boxes, it means he's gone through them, kept all the stuff that he wants to keep, and returned the rest. In some cases, he didn't return. In fact, at one point, Walt was left with 64 boxes out of the storage room, returned with only 30. So 34 boxes suddenly found their way outside of the U.S. possession, and who knows in whose possession they are. So you land up with 102 documents that are listed in great detail here in the indictment. And these are all, as I pointed out to you earlier, these are documents that will be useful in a war. These are documents that matter to you if you're about to fight a war with the United States. As you read through them here, you'll be able to see that they are mostly military documents. So there we go here. Sorry about this. There were 27, by the way, in Trump's office and 75 in the storage room, the number of documents that were not ultimately returned in time. And so the top here, you've got a document dated May the 3rd, 2018, concerning White House intelligence briefing related to various foreign countries. A document dated May 9th, 2018, concerning White House intelligence briefing related to various foreign countries. So they're all foreign countries. And where there are other descriptions here, it says that there are military capabilities of a foreign country and the United States, and a handwritten annotation in this case. And so this goes on and lists all these documents, and there's a fair number of them. I tried to match some of them up to what I thought was happening in the news on some days. And here's some of what I was able to see. So take this, for example, on January the 6th, this document that was it's described as top secret special handling, a document dated May 6, 2019, concerning White House intelligence briefing related to foreign countries, including military activities and planning around those foreign countries. Well, what was happening in the news that day was that the United States was sending an aircraft carrier as a warning to Iran. So who wanted all this information about the foreign countries and their military activities? Who was he giving that to? Who was he intending that to go to? My guess is that was a country potentially like Israel, which might be really interested, or Saudi Arabia might be really interested in the Iranian capabilities. I'm sorry about this. It's almost time to go. So I've done this for a few pages here, and look at this one. This is one that really stuck out at me because I remember this case and being so outraged that we didn't know the contents of this actual conversation that took place. So document number 7 of there, documented date October 21st, 2018, concerning communication with the leader of a foreign country. Well, guess who he happened to have communication with in a foreign country? That's the day that Trump was expressing his skepticism about the Saudi account of the Khashoggi's death. But still saying nobody has told me that the Saudi Crown Prince is responsible for ordering the death. But I would love it if he wasn't responsible. And then, of course, as you know, later on he ends up supporting the Saudi Crown Prince, who is well known to have been involved in the murder of the Washington Post's Jamal Khashoggi. So these are some examples. There are many, many more. And I urge you all to try and do this matching game with me. I mean, there's, 102 documents ultimately. Let's see if we can match them all to the events that happened that day. Because for some reason, Donald Trump kept these. He kept, I think maybe 27 in his office, and those are the ones they're really focused on. If he kept these for a reason. Who was he intending these to go to? What was their intended target? Which country was eager to get this information from him? And why was he so eager to give it to them? And that's the reason I'm encouraging you all to read this indictment carefully. That's the reason I'm saying to all of you tonight that it really is about espionage. This is not a documents case. This is an espionage case, the most significant espionage case in American history. We've got an American president credibly accused, I think, in these pages of committing espionage against the United States, basically being the Manchurian candidate that we all suspected him to be from day one on Narativ. You remember we started broadcasting on this podcast of maybe 5 years ago. My blog started 7 years ago. On day one, I said, this guy's a Russian asset. Be careful of him. And throughout the years, people have been, somehow convincing others that that this isn't the case, that this was some sort of hoax, that there was no collusion, there was no obstruction. There clearly was. And now all the way through the entire administration, all the way into his post-presidency, where he's keeping these documents, and it looks to me like, potentially selling them to the global market, to the highest bidder, or maybe to use it as some sort of ransom or whatever it is that he's intending to use. What we're seeing here is someone who's breaking the law on multiple fronts, but doing it in the most vicious way to harm America in the most vicious way. And I'm glad for those of you that are still here on Narativ, I appreciate you all being here, because I know there's a lot of people trying to convince you that I'm not telling you the truth. Reading these pages, this indictment is vindication, I think, for a lot of us who have been fighting very hard to convince everyone that there was something very, very wrong with the Donald Trump administration, and namely that he was working as a Russian asset. And of course, that he also has these members of his alliance, the Chinese, the Israelis, Saudi Arabians, the UAE, the Egyptians, you name it. They've all taken a little piece of this. And I think that's what's going to be coming out in this court case. Be careful of these next elections, because they're not giving up. They're here for the fight. They're going to be bombarding you at home with daily messages that everything you're seeing before your eyes is not real. They're going to be telling you that you are not to believe anything that you are seeing in court. That in fact, the court case, if we ever get to see it, because now it's not even being televised, which it must be televised. Of course, it must be televised. Let's say that it isn't televised. Just imagine how little information we're actually going to get from inside that courtroom. How little we're going to find out, about where these documents were being destined to go, or where he thought he was going to send them. So this war for democracy continues to be waged. We're not done with it yet. We have not won it yet. We have one more big battle ahead, and it's next November. And if you're not focused on next November, you really should be. This is they say this every election. This is a do or die election for democracy, but this really is a do or die election for democracy. Start getting focused, start getting organized right now. Make sure that your candidates are the right ones and that you're in the right camp. And take a look at this indictment. Really read into it and see how little of this is being communicated to you as a public right now. You have to watch this broadcast to get a lot of little bits of information, context around all of this to understand what is going on. So I'll just quickly take a look back here at the live stream and see if there's any questions you guys might have or any concerns. Don't forget the Silicon Valley libertarians and their political agendas are absolutely so involved in all this. In the future, hunting those that destroy environment. Okay. All right, guys. I think it's basically it. That's not a copy machine, I don't think, in the storage room. I know someone else raised it. It looks like a boxes to me. It doesn't look like a copy machine. So that's is a question around that, but I don't believe that's the case. It is nice of Jack Smith to make it so clear. Pictures taken by Trump's employees. Indeed, I mean, so impressed by Jack Smith's professionalism and his ability to keep this case so obvious to people. And I really appreciate him as well. All right. Lots of other good comments here. Thank you so much. Oh, I have lots to say about the LIV golf tournament and the PGA and who's really brokering that. That's a whole show for another day. I wish I had more time to produce more content for you guys. Thank you for being here tonight. This really is the last show for the season. I just came back on because I wanted to cover the indictment. We'll be back in just a matter of weeks. I'm still here every day trying to figure out the new season, trying to figure out how we get to make up for all the lost audiences we get off not being on Twitter. Keep promoting us. It really makes a difference when you keep promoting us. I can't tell you what a huge difference it makes when you tell your friends or your relatives about the show, because then they check it out and then someone else checks it out. Also, don't forget that we really do rely on you to produce the shows. We rely on you so much for your patronage, for your sponsorship, and you can do that now by going to patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative. Check it out. $10 is the recommended monthly patronage that we were asking for, but you can give us whatever you can. On that note, I'm going to take my really allergic self back to bed, and we shall see you when the new season starts in a few weeks, unless there's more news to break, which undoubtedly there will be. Thank you for suffering through this episode with me. I really appreciate your being here. Keep up the good fight. This war is not over. And it's certainly one worth fighting for. So for democracy and for everybody else and everything else, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
One day you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.
Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives.